Welcome to Heal to Heal with E. James podcast. On this podcast, my guest and I will discuss topics and ways to help us to heal in every area of our lives. I believe that everyone can live a life that is happy, healthy, and whole. So I'm on a mission to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill. Deal with your problem, heal from the pain, and fulfill your purpose. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get to it. Hey guys, real quick, before we jump into the episode, I need you to do the 3 S's for me. What is that? First of all, I need you to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss an episode of our podcast. Number 2, I need you to share it with your family and friends. Don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone else. Lastly, I need you to say something. Leave us a comment. Let us know how we're doing. Let us know what you want to see from us, what you like, what you don't like. We are open to your suggestions. We want to know everything that you want to let us know about the podcast. All right. Now, get back to the episode. All right. Welcome to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. I am your host, Ernest James, and I believe that everyone can and should live a life that is whole, healed, and healthy. And therefore, I'm on a mission to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill, to deal with your problems, to heal from the pain, and to fulfill your purpose. Thank you guys once again for tuning in to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. If you haven't already, make sure that you listen, like, subscribe, and share our podcast on all of our social media platforms. Also, make sure that you guys are checking us out on our new YouTube channel, which is the Deal to Heal Podcasting Network on YouTube, where you will find the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast, as well as our sister podcast, the Girl Dad Discussions podcast. Both of those podcasts are available on the Deal to Heal Podcasting Network. So make sure you guys go there and check us out there. Our product of the week, as you guys know, we are a self-sustained podcast, and the way that we stay on the air is by bringing you amazing products for you to purchase. So our product of the week is our Purpose Journal, as well as our Purpose Planner, because I believe that we are to journal, or we should journal, to keep track of where we've been and where we are, as well as plan for our future. So you can get your copy of our Purpose Journal and our Purpose Planner on Amazon. The links are in the description. Make sure you also check out the description and the show notes for other great information that we have available there as well. So make sure you guys go there and check it out. But today, just like any other day, we are blessed with a guest, Miss Amy. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am well. First of all, let me say thank you for being here, because you could have been doing anything else with anyone else, but you're here with me and my listeners, and we definitely appreciate it. So, Amy, do me a favor. Tell myself and our listeners a little bit about yourself and who you are and what it is that you do.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm real excited to be here, and I'm real excited to be talking to your listeners about something that's really important, something that really affected my life for the beginning half of my life, actually, and that's manipulation and narcissistic abuse. And after overcoming it myself from an adopted family and learning to overcome myself in the aftermath, I now help individuals learn to overcome themselves and build their identity and build their lives back after manipulation and a narcissist just tears it apart. Because that's what they do. They don't just break your heart. They hijack your entire identity. And they gaslight you into thinking that, it's all your fault too. It's just a crazy mind game. And untangling that is such a chore. And if you don't have the right resources to do it, oh goodness, it's tough. It's tough. Trust me.
Yeah. And I know that you have the podcast, the Passion from Pain podcast, in which I was a guest as well on your podcast. And so to all my listeners, we'll make sure that we put the link to her podcast in the show notes. So when you guys finish watching my podcast, then go right on over there and watch our episode on Amy's podcast.
Yeah.
But let's jump right into this thing, Amy. Because you mentioned about, from an early age, the manipulation started, and even you mentioned a adoptive family.
Yeah.
So let's go back as far as you're willing, in your own story to, kind of tell us where it started for you, or what was the initial, things that started it, and what was the turning point in your life where you were like, all right, I got to do something different and do something about this.
Yeah, so I was adopted at a really young age. So as an infant, oddly enough, my babysitter is the one who adopted me. She said something when she saw something. She saw that my biological mother was being neglectful. Actually, had almost had killed me at the age of about 2 months old by feeding me a can of chili. And so when she had dropped me off to be watched for the day, so she could go to work, my babysitter or my adopted mom had noticed that, I was in distress, and she had asked her what was wrong. She answered, "Oh, I don't know." And, my babysitter at the time took me to the hospital, and later the truth came out that she had fed me a can of chili, and yeah, it had almost killed me. And so, in that moment, I thank God that, she was there, and she intervened, because had I stuck around with my biological mother, there's no doubt in my mind that she would have killed me. Now, was it through just not knowing what to do? Was it because, she had bad intentions? I don't know. I was very, very young. And I've heard stories, but that's all they are. I don't know facts necessarily surrounding that. But fast forward, many years, I was adopted by my babysitter. She was a foster mother. And so she knew the right people, and to file the paperwork, and get me taken away and put into protection and into custody with her. And she ended up falling in love with me, her and my adopted dad, and everything was great, up until about the age of about 7, when her and my adopted dad divorced. And a few years later, my adopted mom ended up remarrying another man, and he was a real kind of deadbeat kind of dad kind of guy. He ended up moving us out to Kansas from California. Couldn't hold down a job, wouldn't hold down a job. My adopted mother was disabled. She had lots of mental health issues as well, depression and anxiety and whatnot. So it was really hard for her to hold down a job. But at the age of 11, I was pretty much asked to start working, to help support the family, to help put food on the table, to help keep lights on, to help pay rent. And so I did. I didn't know any better. This was my family, and I was always told that I had been chosen. Most people don't get to choose their family. Most people don't get to choose their kids, but I was chosen. I was adopted. And so I believed those kind of lines my whole life. So I had felt like I was loved. I didn't understand that it was a manipulation tactic until much later in life. But I worked full time from the age of 11 and all the way through high school, until one day my stepdad decided that I came home from work, and I found that he was emptying our house. My mother had been admitted to the hospital. I had no idea I was at work. She had been admitted to the hospital, and he decided he was going to leave her while she was in the hospital. And he was emptying our house that night. And that night, I didn't want to stick around for the nonsense, and so I ran away for 2 days with my boyfriend. They wouldn't let me go into the hospital to see my mom, and I had nowhere else to go. So I ran away for 2 days with my boyfriend at the time, and I panicked my mother a little bit. But in that, is when the first, I guess, conversation about me having any kind of mental health problems surfaced. Depression, bipolar, anxiety, because I was depressed about not having a normal childhood, not having a normal adolescence, going through all the nonsense that my stepdad had put us through. And, my mom took me to a psychiatrist after that, because she was legitimately worried about me. And, I was put on medication at a really, really young age. About the age of 13 is when they started putting me on mental health drugs to try to get me to feel happy in my crappy situation. I kind of later learned. But fast forward, I'd been on and off these medications all this time, this whole time, still financially supporting my mother. And we ended up moving out to California to move in with a brother of mine, her biological son. He was about 11 years older than me. So when my stepdad left, we moved out with him, and he was going to take care of her and whatnot. And I continued to work and help support until he lost his job. And now here I am supporting everybody, him and my mom. And this continued until I was about 25 years old. The whole time, the depression getting worse, the anxiety getting worse. I'm trying every single pill they're throwing at me. The mental health field, they just love me because I'm a dollar sign. I'd been through every single kind of therapy program there was at the time. Nothing was working, and everything was making it so much worse. And they were piling on the diagnoses along with all the pills in an effort to get me to just be happy. Until one day I had gotten a phone call at work that my car was about to be repossessed. And just before that, my mom had called me. They had just turned out the lights. And I knew sitting on my counter at home was a notice to have the water turned off in about 2 days. I had just gotten paid 4 days earlier. And I go to check my bank account to see what I could do, who I could pay, how I could manage my way through this. And there was only $48 left in my bank account, and I had just been paid 4 days before. Hadn't bought any food yet for the house or anything like that. And what I found out was that my brother had gone and written checks all over town. He was purchasing dresses and high heels and jewelry and makeup and crowns and fabric, and he had wrote himself a check to cover his bar tab for the week. What he was doing was trying to chase his dreams of becoming a famous drag queen. And so he spent my entire paycheck, for the most part, on all of this stuff. And so I went into pretty much a full-blown panic attack, and I was sent home from work, which made me freak out even more because I couldn't afford to take the day off. And I'm like, no, I can't take the day off. But, they're like, Amy, you're no good to anybody right now. You need to leave. And so instead of going home, I went to urgent care to get some Xanax. I needed to calm down so I could figure out my next move. What am I going to do? And, I wasn't expecting what happened that day. I had never seen this doctor before, never met him, never heard of him. He'd never seen me, never seen my chart before. But he reviewed my chart, and he looked at all the medications I'd been on since I was about 13 years old. And he couldn't believe the amount of mental health drugs that I had tried. He couldn't believe the amount of diagnoses that I'd had in such a short amount of time. So I had been diagnosed and misdiagnosed and re-diagnosed, probably a dozen times over in this time period while they're trying to figure out what was wrong with me this whole time, thinking something's wrong with me. And, he looked through my chart. He started asking questions about what was going on and my past and my situation. And, he looked right at me and he told me, Amy, most people, when they have a chemical imbalance, these medications help. And for you, they're making it worse. They're not helping. Most people, they not necessarily get better, but they get stabilized in some sort of way. Okay. But we're not even seeing that. You're getting worse with everything. And with everything that you tell me that's going on, I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, these medications are never going to help you. Because your problem is not a chemical imbalance. Your problem is strictly situational. Your depression, your anxiety is situational. And the minute you change your situation is the minute the depression and the anxiety is going to go away. It ain't going to fix you until then. And so, he asked some more thought-provoking questions of me, and he pointed out the manipulation and the financial abuse and the emotional abuse and the narcissism that I'd been living under essentially since I was about 10, 11 years old. And I had to, really look at my life and my family and everything I had been through. And it was just so clear at that point. I don't know why I'd never seen it before, didn't want to, didn't know about it. You could speculate all day long, right?
Yeah.
But in the end, I was just a kid and I was a young adult. I didn't know any better, and this was the only family I'd ever known. And so, yeah, I had to face that. And, he was right. Everything that was going on in my life was a result of manipulation, narcissism, and mental and emotional abuse.
Yeah. And that wow, that's in depth, to say the least.
Yeah.
And it started off so good. Like I was adopted. I'm like,
Yeah.
all right, cool, all right, we're getting there. My family haven't we haven't legally adopted, right?
Mhm.
But ever since I was younger, my mom and my dad, but particularly my mom, was always helping people. And we even went through a time period where we needed help as well. And I shared this story sometime on the podcast that we were maybe middle class. I would like to think higher middle class at one time.
Yeah.
My dad worked for the phone company. We had the house with the picket fence and the two-car garage, like literally, the whole 9 yards. We had the camper. We used to take, vacations in the camper in the summertime. And through, I was young at the time, so I don't really even know all that took place, but whatever happened, he lost his job and then some other things
Mhm.
happened. And then basically we were starting from zero, like we lost
Yeah.
everything. And so we end up, my dad, my mom, and my 8 siblings and I, which is nine kids, ended
Mhm.
up staying with my grandmother, who only had a ranch, a ranch style house, and all of us sleeping in one bedroom, in
Yeah.
my grandma's house for some time until my parents were able to rebuild and get back on their feet. But because of that experience, and probably even more so even before that, my mom always helped people, but especially after that experience, we always had a heart, to help people because people helped us. You know what I mean? Even after we left my grandmother's house, I remember, sleeping on the floor, and one of our uh, church members who opened up their door, their home to us, and allowed us to stay with them. And so even in my own life as an adult, I think over the last 10 years or so, I haven't had 1 year that I haven't had someone stay with me. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Just to help, help them out. And so
Yeah.
that's always been part of our story. And
Mhm.
other people in my family has been emergency shelter for for children and things of that nature, and adoption. So that's always been a part of in the background of my family, that we've always been active in. So when you even started the conversation with that, I'm like, all right, cool, my type of people, what I mean?
Right. Yeah,
But
no,
then,
and it's wonderful that you guys do all of that. And, it is people like that that ended up helping me,
Mhm.
later on, when I'm looking to set back up, when we get a little further into the story here about how I overcame myself. But yeah, it was people like that, like your mother and like your family, who just opened their house and opened their hearts is, really what helped strangers, oddly enough,
Yeah.
not
Yeah,
my
and
family.
it's always like that a lot of the times, because
Yeah.
even the people that I've helped, most of them I didn't necessarily know all the time. Like a lot of them were kids, were my son's friends who just was in situations, and it was like, all right, come on, help you get on your feet. One guy in particular, he's probably the oldest person that I've had. Well, not the oldest, but around the oldest that I've had. He was like in his early late teens, early 20s, and when I met him, he was introduced to me by another friend of mine. And he was
Mhm.
like, he knew him from when he was younger. He was the only child. His mom had gotten sick,
Oh,
and his family didn't want to take him in, and basically he was literally homeless.
mm,
And so he introduced him to me, and I took him in and helped him get his GED and driver's license and all of those things, and eventually he moved out and doing his own thing. And it's been a while since I even heard from him. So I guess he's doing all right. He got a good start and flew to the
yeah.
moon. So I'm
My
just gonna
boss,
hope the best. You know what I mean?
the boss always tell me no news is always good news.
Yeah. So yeah, so I hope he's doing well. But that's been the story,
Yeah.
for a lot of us, even when we talk about, the passing from pain, those painful memories of our family being in a position where we needed help has definitely transitioned to us having the heart to help,
Yeah.
to help others and return that favor that we once got, in our time of need.
Yeah.
One of the things I want to touch on though, what you talked about was when you went to the doctor and he kind of recognized everything that was going on in your life,
Yeah.
which I think the words that he said to you is so beneficial, even outside of everything that you're going through, but just
Mhm.
in regular life when you look at it and you realize that yeah, you're going through a lot of things,
Mhm.
but a lot of things are situational,
Yeah.
and it's like if you change what you see, then the things that you see will change. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's like, unfortunately, we don't always see the areas, that are affecting us to the point that we are find ourselves in these situations. But when
Mhm.
we talk to someone, whether it be a counselor or a trusted friend or, a mentor, and they're able to point out these areas like, what, if you just, you know, change some things here and change some things over there, and it kind
Mhm.
of begin to change the whole picture, and I think that was a great thing that doctor was even able, not only able to see that what they were doing wasn't working, but didn't just go along with the program. You know what I mean? Like, oh, okay, well, let me subscribe a couple things. You know what I'm saying? But really take out the time to see you in the midst of what you're dealing with.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. I wasn't a very spiritual person at the time. In fact, I had been very church hurt, and had turned away from the church and from God for about 20 years. And so at that time, I wasn't very spiritual and I wasn't very religious. However, I could not deny what I felt in that moment, and that
Mm.
was the fact that I do believe that it was divine intervention of some sort. Now I'm back into church and I'm back with God and Jesus Christ, and rectifying that part of my life.
Mhm.
But at the time, no, but I definitely did feel that because he didn't know nothing about me. Never seen me, he didn't know nothing, and he just looked at me and said, no, this is your problem. And he's so right, because I mean, depression is, you're unhappy with your life, you're unhappy with your situation. Sometimes you can point it out, sometimes you can't,
Mm.
sometimes you can't recognize it. Like me, I couldn't recognize it, and the whole time I thought something was wrong with me, like my family had told me the whole time, like the whole mental health system that I was a part of had told me the whole
Mhm.
time that I was the problem. And it wasn't that I was the problem, it was the situation that I was in was the problem, and the fact that I couldn't see that. And so even if you are on medications, and you do have to take those for depression and whatnot, those are only going to take you so far. I mean, you
Mhm.
do have to take some action in your life, and you do have to make some necessary changes in your life, even if you are on the medications. Otherwise, I mean, the medications are only going to do so much.
Right, right. Yeah, and I think it's important for us to have the conversations, because I'm listening to, even as you're saying your stories, like, not recognizing that, your family may have been, the foundation of which all of this was built on,
Yeah.
but because it was your family and this was all you knew, is this, like, this is
Mhm.
normal, and
Yeah.
so a lot of times we find ourselves in that situation too, is like, it's not until we start sharing our story or talking to other people and they were like, that's not normal. You know what
Yep.
I'm saying? But you
Yep.
were like, what do you mean it's not normal? I've been doing this since I was little, you know?
Yeah.
And so again, going back to that, that thing of changing what you see. And that's why I think that, personal development, which I've really gotten into the last couple of years, and it
Mhm.
has been master monumental in my changes in my life and personal growth and things of that nature. But being able to really dive deep into who
Mhm.
you are and why you do what you do, it changes so much in your life, and so I think that's why it's important for us to have these conversations that we're having, and even just personally to find if not a therapist or a counselor, but at least a trusted friend to be able to have the conversations that may lead you to the light. Again, when you met this doctor, he's like, hey, well, let me suggest that, you might not need none of this stuff. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? You might just need to get away, like
Uh-huh.
the commercial, like the commercial say, need to get away, you might just
Yeah.
need a new environment
Mhm.
and you'll be surprised how much that changes, your outlook on life and things like, wow,
Yeah.
and even in your situation, like you said, you were kind of going through that. How did that lead to what you're doing now, though? Because now you got the podcast. So what
Mhm.
was that? You meet the doctor, you had this conversation, and it's like, okay, maybe I can change some things. So what was that process of changing that even led for not only for you to be doing better, but now you're like, all right, I'm gonna turn this into something.
Yeah, so I didn't even think about it at the time. Like you said, I didn't even know that this was, anything but a normal situation, right?
Mhm.
And it took, me talking to people saying, my story and all of that. And they're like, holy cow, what you lived through, I can't imagine. And it took hearing that over and over and over. But, in the aftermath of that, okay, I was faced with a decision. I was hit with that news and I was faced with a decision. So at the same time, I was a single mother. And I had just found out that my son, who was 3 years old at the time, had been diagnosed with autism. So I had that on me as well. And so, and his dad, I had kicked out of the house because he didn't want to get a job, right? So he was a whole other dynamic in that situation
Yeah.
too. So when I heard that news from the doctor, it was okay. I'm looking at being a single mother of an autistic child with zero help, nobody to turn to. Because if I cut these people out of my life, I have nobody to turn to. Or I continue the road I'm on and continue to support these people. And at least I feel like I have some people in my life, right?
Mhm.
But I knew I couldn't continue to do that because I had already up to this point, tried to commit suicide 3 different times. And so
Mhm.
I knew that if I continued to stay there, that at some point it would happen and I would leave my son to live the same life that I had lived, and I could not do that to him. So I packed up and I left, and I had nothing. I had to leave my job because I had to move to a different town. All I had was my car, my son, and me, and I had to find an apartment, but I had no money. But I found an apartment complex that sympathized with the situation. They allowed me to move in, but they gave me 30 days to come up with first, last, and security. And that was a lot of money for somebody who didn't have any.
Mhm.
And I found myself a job. I was washing dishes. It was the first job I could get, and I was thankful to have it. And 5 days later, I was waiting tables, and I learned very very quickly that my attitude and my level of effort, and my ability to push this aside, and just connect with people, played a huge role in the amount of money that I was going to make. And so I learned how to do that, and how to wait tables and how to make people feel good and have
Mhm.
conversations and, just provide an experience. And, through that, I took every opportunity that I could that came my way. And I worked my way up from dishwasher all the way to district manager of a corporate restaurant. and
Wow.
district training manager. And so essentially I got paid for my business education instead of paying for that fancy certificate, right?
Yeah.
That a lot of people have. And so from there, I then built or got the confidence to run my own business. Um, and this whole time, I have to work on myself because let me tell you, the depression wasn't gone. The anxiety
Mhm.
wasn't gone just because I left. And the conditioning and the manipulation and, all of everything that they had told me my whole life was still very much a part of me and my mindset and my nervous system, right? Because when you're mentally abused, emotionally abused, it is on a cellular level. It is, your brain is just so rewired in these such weird ways, that you just sometimes don't know up from down. And so you've got to, essentially rewire your whole mind. And that's not easy, especially when you don't know how to do it and you don't have the resources available anymore to go see a doctor to help you do this kind of stuff. So I had to study. So this whole time that I'm working my way up in corporate restaurants, I'm studying psychology and dark psychology, manipulation and mind control and narcissism. And I had this need to understand why this happened and how it happened. And more importantly, I needed to know how I ended up falling for it. I had a huge issue with feeling stupid for being so stupid to allow this to happen because I was a smart kid. I was a straight A student, but I was stupid enough to fall for this, right? And so I had a huge hurdle I had to overcome in that mindset right there.
Mhm.
And so I had to do all the studying and I studied, the depression and the anxiety. I studied all the dark psychology. I even studied ancient warfare strategies, Sun Tzu, Machiavelli, and all of that. And then I went on to the Stoics and studied philosophy, and it all tied together. And it is what is essentially saved me, you know, doing this studying. Oddly enough, a lot of the Sun Tzu stuff saved me too. I talk about him a lot because it applies so much in our mindset, in our situation, and just in our battling our daily lives. But at the end of all of this, I leave restaurants, decide I want to, run businesses and whatnot. And I do. And then I run my husband's auto body shop with him. And that's when I start to get bored. I'm not fulfilled. I have, my husband now, we've been together for 18 years. We have 2 kids together now. And my son from then, he's 23 years old now and doing wonderful. But there was a level of within me that I needed to fulfill still. And I couldn't help but think that I needed to put this out there for other people who needed to overcome themselves in the aftermath of narcissistic abuse. And when it hit me really hard was when my husband had a family member who was going through a divorce of a narcissistic husband, and watching her life fall apart and watching her fall apart. And I knew I could help her through that. I knew I had the resources, I knew I had the knowledge, and I knew I had the power to do that within me. And that's when I decided that I needed to put this together for other people because I have the knowledge and I have the the know-how and I have the inspiration to. And then it turned into a calling. I was ignoring it for a very long time, and then all of a sudden everything in life starts going wrong until I start walking the path of putting together the book and the course and the podcast. And then all of a sudden, life starts falling in place. I start moving away from doing that and life starts to fall apart. But I start moving towards putting it all together and life starts to fall into place. And that was telling me right there, okay, this is what you need to be doing. This is the purpose that you've kind of been looking for this whole time that you've been finding yourself and healing and all of that. You've been looking for the purpose, for the passion from the pain, right? And
Yeah.
this is it. And that's when I decided to put the course together, put the books together. And in doing the research for that, I was having so many amazing conversations with so many folks like yourself, and I started recording those conversations. And I decided that those conversations that I was having, that was just supposed to be research for my book, would benefit people on a bigger level and impact people on a grander scale than any one single book that I could ever write.
Yeah.
And that's when I decided to do the podcast. And I was astonished at how many people wanted to come on the podcast and share their stories. And the rest is pretty much history. I'm working my little butt off, and talking to so many people, and getting the word out there, and the healing out there, and the stories out there, more importantly, that you can overcome yourself. You can overcome these painful moments. And in fact, it's not just overcoming them, but something grand and transformational can and does come from these painful experiences that we go through in our lives. We just have to do the work, and we just have to look at things in the right light, and it can absolutely change your life.
Yeah, yeah, and that's one thing that I talk about. I always say pain leaves clues, right? And or should I say, purpose leaves clues. And it's not until you get on that path that you're able to look back at your life and like connect the dots and see that all through your life there was these little breadcrumbs that was being dropped that you never even really paid attention to until you get to the part till you get to the space in your life where it's like, all right, now I'm looking for that purpose. And you realize like, oh, all those things that I've been through was leading me to here.
Yeah.
And I talk about one of the things that I went through when I went through my own depression and things when my mom passed away. And eventually I started a nonprofit doing bereavement support. But I started looking back at my life, and I was able to see little things that happened, in my life that kind of showed me like, yeah, this is an area that you need to be in. And one incident in particular, it was one night. I probably was like 18 or 19, if I was 18 or 19, but really young, right?
Mhm.
And me and my cousin, we're out and we go to like the corner store. It's probably like 10 o'clock at night. And we
Mhm.
go to this corner store just to get whatever we was going in there to get. And so we come into the store, and it's maybe about 5 or 7 people in the store, nothing crazy. And so we get our stuff and we get ready to get in line.
Yeah.
And these two guys come in, right? And one is a regular sized guy, like my size, maybe 5 foot, whatever. But the guy he was with looked like he could have been a football player. He's like tall and big, big guy. And the big guy is crying.
Mm.
And then also these are two African American guys.
Mhm.
So first of all, to be out in public crying is one thing, but then he was like really like emotional. And this is like, okay, this is different, because as, number one, just as men, we're kind of like be tough, and you have those conversations, and don't let nobody see you cry. And this guy clearly was distraught, you know,
Yeah.
and so he ends up getting in line. They end up getting in line right in front of us, as we go to the counter. And as they're having this conversation, I can hear them talking. And what I gathered was, I don't know who the female was, but it was a female person that had passed away, in the life of this big gentleman. And so the shorter, smaller guy, should I say, was trying to comfort the larger guy who was clearly emotional and crying. And so we were waiting in line. We're probably like, the fourth or fifth person in line. And he's talking to the smaller guy. And then he just turns around and he takes his fist and he hits the top of the counter, and it
Oh.
like echoes throughout the whole store. You know what I mean? It's like one of those moments in a movie when everything stops. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? It was
Yeah.
like that. And he's like, he turns around and he says, "I just want some cigarettes." And so
Mm.
everybody that was in front of him was like, "Hey, get this guy his cigarettes." You know what I mean? And so they kind of
Yeah.
move to the front. They purchase the cigarettes. They walk out the door. I don't think I've ever seen that gentleman before that. I definitely haven't seen him after that.
Mhm.
And again, I was only like 18 and 19 years old, but that
Right.
story, that experience stuck in my head. So
Mhm.
fast forward, now I'm late 20s after my mom passed away, and I'm going through, bereavement support myself. And I'm like, oh man, I'm really enjoying it, to the point that now I want to, I realized while I was there in the bereavement, do my bereavement support, I did my time, and then I stayed there a year as a volunteer. And during
Yeah.
that time period, there was only one African American family that came, through those sessions. And so
Mhm.
taking that, my experience, taking that fact, and then even remembering that story of those two guys, I'm like, our community need this bereavement
Yeah.
program, and that's what inspired me to start, um, the nonprofit at the time, and Christian
Mhm.
Charities, which was named after my mom and my mother-in-law, who both had passed away from cancer.
Mhm.
But long story short, it was that when I looked back and I remember like so vividly that story, I can tell it, what I mean, as long ago as it was. And in that moment, I wasn't depressed. My family was good. Everything was going. So why would I remember that one moment that probably was only like
Mhm.
maybe 5 minutes of my life as a teenager?
Yeah.
And the reason why, because it plays a part now. Because now it's like,
Mhm.
this is why you remember that. Because you remember that guy. You connected with that guy years ago. And now that you're living, actually, and this is just a revelation why I'm saying it. You're now living in the space where he was. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? When my
Yeah.
mom passed, now I'm him now. You know what
Yep.
I mean? And
Yep.
that just came to my head now. It's like, so now you get the purpose. Now you see what it is, that why you remember that story so vividly, because it was preparing you for this moment. And now
Mhm.
you are to take this moment and change it into something that's going to benefit others. And that's
Yeah.
that uh process of finding purpose in your life, and finding the purpose through the painful things that you've been through. And when you find that space, man, it's just amazing. It's
Oh,
just so.
absolutely. There's nothing like it, and I've worked a lot of jobs, and I went for a ton of opportunities, and I've owned businesses in the past, and thought that I was fulfilled and doing what I wanted to do, but come to find out, no, I wasn't. I wasn't at all. And so here I am now doing this, and the feeling that I get after every conversation with a guest that I have, it's just a profound experience that is impacting me on a level that, yeah, I didn't even know was a part of me, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's always amazing. And like, since I've been podcasting, and I don't even know, I'd never even asked how long you've been podcasting, but at this point for me it's been about 4 years. I think
Mhm.
even this episode now is like episode 200 and something, so
Yeah,
I've been doing it a while.
yeah.
How long have you been podcasting?
Okay, so really weird. Honestly, it'll be a year in February.
Okay, cool.
So
Well,
yeah,
yeah.
um, I yeah, it wasn't even on my radar at all. And I just decided to do it, and then I had to take a small break for about a couple months because in that time when I was putting it all together, we had got the news that my husband had been diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. And
Mm.
so we had to take a break for about 2 months, so that we could go through the chemo and the radiation. And yeah, that was tough. That was tough. And there was no way I could, I had zero creative energy whatsoever during that time. And so I took the break. And then as soon as I came back and started telling my story again, though, it just ignited. And I was not prepared for that response,
Mm.
at all. And so yeah, it's just been an incredible, I don't know, 9 months.
Well, you made it. You made it through the the trial phase. Let me
Yeah.
put it that way, because one of the things I learned, and I was having this conversation today, because I've been like I was on your podcast, but I've been pressing more to get back into being on other people's podcasts as a
Yeah.
guest. And so I had a meeting today with a guy to be on his podcast. And so we were talking about, this podcast, and I was telling him when I started my podcast, I was a part of a community of starting your podcast, like a challenge or whatever.
Yeah.
And I started a message thread with, like, not all of the people, but a lot of the people that was in this group with me that started podcasting at the same time. And it probably was a little over 120 of us or something.
Wow.
And out of that 120, I think I'm like the only one that's still podcasting, you
Oh,
know. And it's
wow.
like, and one thing that I learned, even in the earlier days, that they said, well, most podcasts don't make it past episode 7.
Yeah.
So if you make it past like 10 episodes, then you pretty much, you got what it takes to hang in there. Because when you first start, and it's like, oh man, this is great, and I'm going to start this podcast, and I'm going to talk to people and meet people, and then you start doing it and realize how much work it takes to keep it going, and all
Yep.
of that. And a lot of people be like, yeah, I didn't sign up for that. I just want to talk. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
Yep. 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 I got to learn all this stuff. And, but I was kind of preparing myself for something. I didn't know what. I didn't know
Mhm.
what platform or what avenue I was going to go. I knew I wanted to tell my story. I knew I wanted to help people. And I thought that, being a coach and a content creator was just going to be the way that I was going to do this, and writing the book. And like I said, podcasting wasn't even on my radar at all.
Mhm.
And it just happened to come to me just from having conversations when I was doing research for the book that I was doing. And I fell in love with it. And,
Yeah.
more so than, putting together the courses and stuff like that. And I feel like I can reach more people this way and help more people this way, because, to be perfectly honest, with the course kind of system and stuff,
Mhm.
it kind of felt like it was more like used car salesman-y kind of tactics, which is not me. I am not that kind of person.
Right.
And so I felt like I had to get into that kind of energy to sell a course,
Yeah.
um, and I was like, man, I got all of this information for free. I had to do the work, but I got it for free by researching at the library, researching online, watching YouTube videos for free. And, if I could find a way to make money and offer it for free to people who need it, that's what I really want to do.
Mhm.
Because healing, it shouldn't come at a cost, really. But I know that there is a cost to doing this, and it's a business, and you got to make money and whatnot.
Right.
So I'm still struggling with whether I want to put the course out or not. I do have a full course that's ready to go, but I'm struggling with that part of it. So I'm trying to get
Yeah.
myself out of that mindset of no, you're not a used car salesman, by putting the
Right.
course out there. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I'll say this, even being in the entrepreneur, lifestyle as well, in some cases, one of the things that I've learned, that I've been taught is, when you pay attention, right?
mhm,
And there's as many podcasts that we do, and as many times we share our information, the fact that it's free, a lot of times we'll miss some of the people who need it most,
yeah,
right? And so when there comes an investment, however, and whatever that investment is, whether it's time or money or whatever, when
mhm,
people put an investment into it, then they pay a little more attention to it,
yeah,
and so it's like you could talk about, how you overcame, these challenges, and they're like, oh, okay, nice story. But then when you say, well, to see how it can help you, here's a cost, whatever that investment is, whether it's financial or, again, time or whatever. And because now they have to invest,
mhm,
part of themselves, then they look at it a little differently and start paying attention to it. And it's like, oh, this really does help me. This really
yeah,
is changing the way I look at my life and some of the situations that I'm in. And so just a little encouragement for you, just to be okay, and not being
Yeah.
salesy. Don't be a car salesman with it, but just know that even though in your heart, you'll do it for free and you'll give it away for free, but
Yeah.
also know that without the investment of that person, whatever that investment is, they might not take it as seriously as they can. So you're
Yeah.
doing them a benefit by charging something, whatever, like I said, whatever that investment is, by requiring an investment, you're actually doing them a favor, because then it makes them pay attention to
And
what
see,
they're investing
thank
into.
you for that.
Yeah, no problem,
Because
no problem.
because I do struggle with that, because I see manipulation very, very
Mhm.
easily. I studied it and I lived it for so long. I can see the manipulation tactics so easily, and I don't want to be that person so bad that
Yeah.
I will, do stuff at a disservice to myself, like, giving away the kitchen sink. But you're right. Yeah, people won't pay attention if it's for free. They've got to have some kind of skin in the game
Yeah. Yeah.
in order to really help them. Otherwise, it ain't gonna stick. They're not gonna do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So thank you.
Yep. No problem. Amy, I really enjoyed this conversation, man. I appreciate you being on and sharing your story and your expertise. And I want you to have the last word. I want you to leave us with a word of advice, motivation, however you feel. And also leave us with your social media handles and links and how we can get in contact with you and follow you. So I'll give you a couple of seconds to think about that. To my listeners, thank you guys once again for tuning in to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. Make sure you guys are following us on our website, the dealhealfulfill.org website, to kind of keep up with everything that we have going on. The website should be getting a makeover soon. It's definitely in need of one. But in the meantime, it still is up. And so you guys can go there. Also, make sure you guys are checking out my new personal speakers website, which is ernestjamesspeaksalife.com, where you can find more information about hiring me to come in to be a speaker or to do workshops at your school or organization. And you guys can find more information there. Again, that's ernestjamesspeaksalife.com. Make sure you guys are checking us out there. Also, ebooks by ejames.com. As you guys know, I've written several ebooks. You guys can go to ebooks by ejames.com in order to get your copy of the ebooks. One ebook that in particular that's doing very well right now is the Forgiving Me, the 4-step guide to self-forgiveness. That one is doing very well right now in the space that we're in, because we do hold grudges against ourselves for some of the things that we've done in the past. But that book helps us to kind of break it down and realize that, we were doing the best that we could in the moment. But that one is doing very well right now. Again, that's ebooks by ejames.com, where you can get all of the ebooks, as well as sign up to be an affiliate of the ebooks and earn 50% of the purchase price whenever someone buys an ebook using your link. So make sure you guys go to ebooks by ejames.com in order to sign up for that. Also, Deal to Heal Tees is our inspirational t-shirt line. Put some inspiration in your situation. Wear an inspirational tee and be inspired all day. That is our tagline. Make sure you guys go to healtees.com in order to check out our inspirational t-shirt line, as well as our podcast merch, which is our t-shirts with our podcast logos on it. There's one for the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast, as well as one for the Girl Dad Discussions podcast. Both are available at dealtohealtees.com. Last but not least, over the last couple of years, I've been blessed to be a part of an organization called the Forgiveness Mission. And what we do, we have free virtual workshops bi-monthly talking about everything surrounding forgiveness of self, forgiveness of others, forgiveness of the world, and really breaking down what it means to forgive and how beneficial forgiveness is in our lives. Those workshops are virtual. They're absolutely free, but the information is priceless. So make sure you guys go to forgivenessmission.com to sign up for our next free virtual workshop. Whenever you're listening to this podcast, either one is just passed or there's one coming up, and you can sign up for your free virtual workshop, absolutely free. Or you can go to Eventbrite and sign up for forgiveness workshop sponsored by the Forgiveness Mission. Or again, just go to forgivenessmission.com in order to sign up for our next free virtual workshop. Amy, once again, I want to say thank you so very much for being on. Thank you for sharing your story and your expertise. I want you to have the last word, so the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure talking with you and having your guests listen in tonight. And the one thing that I do want to put out there is that if you're listening right now and you feel broken and confused or ashamed, hear me, you are not weak. Okay, you were compromised by someone who weaponized your goodness. You were compromised by your own thoughts, and your comeback starts the moment you decide you're done handing your power to someone or thoughts who don't even deserve you. Your future is bigger than their control over you. And I love all of you guys, and just come over to the podcast Passion from Pain on YouTube, on all of your major podcast listening platforms, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, all of them. And I feature many, many experts, psychologists, therapists, authors, coaches, and other survivors with incredible stories of survival that you would not believe that they lived through. And they all teach about how to overcome and how they overcame their own pain and how they turned it into a passion. And then passionfrompain.com is where you can find all of the information about the platform. Find the coaching, you'll find the book sign up and the courses that will be coming out here really soon, as well as podcast episodes. And then anything that I am going to be speaking is on the podcast the website as well. So if you want to attend one of the events that I will be speaking at, that's where you find the information too. And then, of course, follow along on Facebook at Passion from Pain. And then there's also TikTok and Instagram at Passion from Pain as well. Thank you so much for having me on, Ernest. This was an amazing experience.
No problem. Thank you for being on. To my listeners, we can't end it no better than that. Thank you guys once again for tuning in to the Deal to Heal with EJ's podcast, where our mission is to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill, to deal with your problems, to heal from the pain, and to fulfill your purpose. Until next time, you guys be blessed. Hey guys, if you're enjoying this podcast, then I know you'll enjoy the Girl Dad Discussion podcast. I'm your host, Ernest James, and I believe the relationship between a daughter and her father is one of the most important relationships a young lady can have. And therefore, my mission is to promote the daddy-daughter relationship by sharing the voices of girl dads to the world. So check out our podcast on every platform where podcasts can be listened to. And if you want to watch the podcast, check us out on our YouTube channel. Again, that's the Girl Dad Discussions podcast with your host, Ernest James. Thanks for listening to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. Remember to listen, like, subscribe, and share. This episode has been brought to you by Deal to Heal Teas. Put some inspiration in your situation. Wear an inspirational tea and be inspired all day. Let's go to dealtohealteas.myshopify.com. Remember, our mission is to help you to deal, heal, and fulfill. Deal with your problem, heal from the pain, and fulfill your purpose. Thanks for listening.